What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. Been a while since I've done some reviews. It's been a crazy news week, and then I've been streaming, released a book. That lots of fun, but getting back to it, been slow at reading just because I've been so busy lately. Welcome to my closet. I think everybody knows I'm making these videos in my closet now from a couple videos ago because it's quiet in here. It doesn't echo as badly, and my kids don't make noise, which is really difficult for making videos and streaming and all that. Whoa! This is my professionalism at work here. I'm not even going to edit this out because I don't edit. So that's it. I don't feel like re-recording this. I'm already a minute in. So yeah, I'm literally in my closet. This is one of my pairs of Yeezys. So I'll do a Yeezy collection tour at some point. I know everybody's jazzed about that. But to Speedball, the Masked Marvel, which is this graphic novel right here. You might see the happy name Ditko there, and you know I get really excited whenever I read any of Steve Ditko's work. It is just a joy to read his comics. There's just, you can tell just in every drawing, there is just an intense love of comics put there that is unparalleled by anybody else. The guy is a master of the medium. And he really tries to keep things in that classic hero style. I've read essays from him where, you know, he just believes that a hero should be a hero. A hero should act heroic. A bad guy should act bad. And that simplicity leads to, honestly, storytelling that just is a breath of fresh air in the modern age. And it was kind of like that at this point. This was 1987. And the issues collected in here are issues 1 through 10, which is the entire collection of Speedball, plus material from Marvel Age Annual number 4, Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 22, which there are backup stories in both of those, Marvel Comics Presents 14 and 56, and Marvel Superheroes 1 and 2, and 5 and 6. So we've got quite a bit of material in here, and it opens up with a nice introduction from Roger Stern. And Roger Stern scripted some of the issues in this, and he did a nice introduction, 4 pages, going over the history of how Speedball was created, which it was originally a Tom DeFalco creation, and as you know, I'm a huge fan of Tom DeFalco, my favorite writer of all time, and he was going to make a character called Ricochet, and then it kind of didn't take off. He was going to do it with Ron Frenz, and they ended up on Thor, so he got too busy. And Ditko came in and was going to do this project. They wanted a different name for it. He is Speedball now. And Tom DeFalco plotted the first 2 with Ditko. Ditko really laid out a lot of the background, which I'll actually turn to the back of this real quick because this is a neat little deal. You get all these little pencil sketches of Steve Ditko drawing the side characters and backgrounds, and doing a family portrait of Robbie Baldwin's family, neat things like that. And this is actually, I don't usually care about the extras in books like this, but just seeing Ditko's process here, he's actually got an inking guide for the inker, is really cool. And there's, of course, a nice little blurb, advertising article in the back. So we get to Speedball number 1. And Speedball number 1 was actually not the first to come out. The Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22, I believe, was the first to come out. And I don't know why they put this cover here before they actually put Amazing Spider-Man number 22. But they actually threw a Speedball story in there first. And it introduced this character who was, he's got these powers. He really doesn't want anybody to find out about them. You get the classic Ditko look. Look at this panel work, and just like look at all the expressions. Very Ditko-esque. I love the little talking backgrounds in his head. Very cool and expressive comics all the way around. And we have he just gets into a sort of tiff with some local folk who were thieving, and then the cops kind of take it from there, and that's the end of that. And then we get into the origin. And the origin was the beginning of the issue number 1. he's in a lab accident, and this like energy comes out, and it gives him his speedball powers. It also gives this cat speedball powers, and they have it, and nobody knows that it hit him. They all think that the lab was clear of people, and they're like, gee, they always go, gee golly, it wouldn't be good if a human actually got involved in this science experiment. And they shut down their experiment, and then suddenly he's got his powers, and he can fight all these criminals. Yay. There's some nice side characters, so there's some cool things going on. So you've got the doctor who he's trying to hide from, with the cat who he's always trying to chase down, who's bouncing around like a speedball also. And you've got these cops, and there's one named Al who like really is like, there's something off about that kid. He's at every crime scene. And it kind of plays on the whole secret identity trope a little bit, because it becomes obvious after a while, like, you know, who the secret identity is for a lot of these characters, and Speedball doesn't really wear too much of a mask. So it's interesting. Steve Ditko actually puts him in situations, because Ditko plotted most of this, and the writers, you know, kind of came in and scripted afterwards for the most part. But he always puts the character in situations where it's like he can become Speedball without anybody seeing, and he can actually fight the bad guy without anybody seeing, and then he rolls in afterwards, and nobody actually saw it. And I like that a little better than the whole, like, you know, rolls in with Spider-Man, and you've got the cast of characters going, there's Spider-Man, because with that, it's obvious who the secret identity is at this point. But when nobody actually saw what went down, and it's a mystery, and whether Speedball was even there or not, it adds to that secret identity bit quite a bit. And it starts out, his parents are actually under investigation here for what's going on. And well, I guess it's a later plot. This is a they thought they caught the masked guy, and his dad's the DA, or assistant DA rather, and he's in trouble because the guys got free, and it turns out that there were twin brothers, and that's why they would have alibis for different situations. So pretty neat, nice twist, good opening for Speedball. We get back into the annual again. Oh, I think this is a misprint, because I believe that this says Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22. I don't think there were 2 Speedball stories in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22. I think this was actually the first Speedball story, and they have his deal in the Speedball issue, and I think they accidentally printed Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22 at the top, and that's wrong. I believe this is the issue that's in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22. It actually states it here. Yes, it is. Okay, cool. So here's the table of contents. The first 2 stories are Speedball number 1. Then it gets into Amazing Spider-Man Annual. Actually gets into Amazing... Gosh, this is all wrong. Somebody did not proofread this whatsoever. I'm getting annoyed here. Marvel, if you want me to proofread your books and make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen, I will do this for you. This is kind of embarrassing. So the table of contents is quite wrong through here, as these stories don't actually come in order. But you get a little one-off story there. We get into issue number 2 for Speedball the Masked Marvel. And there's this like goo character, and so it's interesting the villains that they put him up against. They try to like stop his powers, and he's bouncing around, right? He's a ricochet Speedball. And so this goo character stops him from ricocheting, and that's the deal. And there's always a twist on how he can actually do this. This is a very classic 60s style romp. And, you know, it is just Speedball gets into these situations. He gets thrust into these situations. He doesn't even know what's going on. And he then just does what's right to take down the bad guy every time, who's clearly bad. It's very moral of the story type of deal of, you know, always do what's right. It's got good family dynamics. The family loves, even though they argue a bunch, they love him. Even though they don't understand him, they love him. It's not, it doesn't have sort of a, I guess, uber modern flair to it. And I think this was an intent to push back on modern storytelling, even in the 80s, by Ditko. So very fun stuff on that level. This is going to go super long, and I'm sorry, but I really love discussing Ditko's work, so I want to really, you know, just go over it all the way. Love what the colorist did here with the yellow, just to highlight his change into Speedball right there. Also, it made a nice contrast from the other flat colors in here. So good story right there. Each issue really is has 10-page stories, 2 of them per issue, which is really neat because you don't really get that either in comics. So they get that short vibe from when he was doing like Tales of Suspense or from Journey into Mystery or whatever, when he was doing those, or the Doctor Strange, because those were never full issue stories. And there is a similarity. Obviously, this character shares a lot with Peter Parker. Because Peter Parker was in a lab accident, got his mysterious powers, and then, of course, Speedball was spurred because his parents were in danger, and Peter Parker was spurred into action because, of course, Uncle Ben was killed. So the difference being that Uncle Ben was killed, and in Ditko's sort of ideal storytelling, the hero doesn't fail like that. The hero doesn't fail to act and then act unheroic. He was okay with Stan Lee writing stuff like that because he thought that Peter Parker was a kid and therefore he could learn, and that's a good process right there. But when he tells heroic storytelling, he really did not enjoy stories like that, and eventually there became too many fights over how, I guess, quote, realistic Spider-Man would be versus how much of an actual hero he would be, and that's why Steve Ditko ended up quitting. So this is really almost like a reaction piece to that 20 years later, where he does almost exactly, I guess, what he would want it to be, with Speedball always really doing the right thing, always saving the day. This is just classic comic storytelling. We got a leaper, of course, to go with his powers also, and he breaks down this storyline here pretty well. Now there is a continuing story that starts to develop through this. We have a fake Chuck Norris. They don't call him Chuck Norris in this one, but he comes and speaks to this school. He's called Chuck Harris. And some guys try to break that up, and Speedball shows up and fights and saves the day, of course. And this is where the continuing story starts in issue number 4. It's very interesting. And, of course, good comics, you know, even though you've got a full beginning, middle, and end of every story, you have that hook, especially in an ongoing series, where you've got something kind of a thread continuing all the way through. And there's this ghost of whatever, and it ends up being this guy who's breaking into the high school and all that. But at the beginning of this, they find that there's a body buried at the high school, and it ends up that there's this dead guy who both of his parents knew. His mom dated the bad guy, and his dad knew him. And so the cops actually start to suspect them about it. As the book goes along, that subplot goes along, even though he finds the bad guy in this issue, there's like a developing bad guy who's in the shadows, and public sentiment starts to turn against them and things like that. Very nice storyline overall, and probably the most enjoyable part of this entire book. So we get into issue 4. Issue 4 right there was the first. There's only a couple issues that are full 22-page stories, and this is one of them. So that setup for that storyline is that, of course, he gets a bad guy and beats him in the middle of that. And we got the cops who keep showing up as the cast of characters here. And he does get his love life involved at some point. He literally fights a rat in this one. Pretty funny. This one actually had 3 storylines in it that were shorter, and they were just quick. They were very fun to read. In this one, there's somebody else who had a lab accident that is kind of like him, and I would have liked him to show back up as another character and have more adventures, because it would have been very interesting to see the juxtaposition between the two, which was very fun. It was a good storyline there. He's got a love interest who he likes, and she kind of likes somebody else in the school who's like a little. He always puts down Robbie in the school, and that tends to happen. And then, as the storyline progresses, you would expect him to kind of like woo that gal away a little bit. It's very similar to Spider-Man with Liz Allen, because she kind of liked him, even though Flash Thompson was her boyfriend-ish. And a lot of similarities there, and it developed into a triangle a little bit, very Archie-like. And of course, Tom DeFalco, who developed this, worked for Archie for a long time, so that makes sense. But all these are just one-off stories that are completely fun, and they're not super serious. There's aliens in this one. I mean, it's all really over the top. Look at that expression right there. Very, very interesting expression right there. Very, very Ditko all the way around. And then, of course, you got this feathered felon. And this is one of those ones where the character doesn't really know what it is. He's kind of a dumb bird, and he just is causing trouble just because he's having fun, and he doesn't realize that it's causing trouble. Another one that, again, could come back, and it... because this ended so fast, there really weren't any return characters as far as villains go. And yeah, just good stuff all the way around. Single stories. Don't need to spoil all of them for you. You can kind of read through this yourself if you're interested. Now this book, another cool part of this book, which I forgot, which I'm neglecting, is the fact that they printed the letters columns in here. Once I find the letters columns, they didn't do a letters columns every issue, or at least they didn't print them in this book, but they are in here. There's like 3 letters columns. I love reading those letters and then the editorial responses to them. And I saw right away that a lot of the people were just like, hey, this is kind of cheesy. This isn't really the type of comic book we want to read in the 80s. And I was lamenting for Ditko, because I'm sitting there like, I know what he's doing. He's intentionally writing these this way. He wants to prove a point about comics and do things the, quote, right way according to his moral standards. And the audience isn't buying it. And they're, it was canceled very fast. It didn't sell very well, obviously. And it was, it's just one of those things that, there was just not a huge market for this. I think the hero, even the design is really cool and different, but he's hard to relate to. When I read Speedball in later Marvel comics, I always thought this was a weird dude, and I kind of never really liked him just because of the way he looked. Just as from an aesthetic perspective, it's just like it's like got a little bit of the thing on him, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. So very interesting reaction at the time. And of course, this graphic novel also did not sell very well. I looked this up on Comic-Con, which goes over the sales, and this sold less than 400 copies. It's freaking Steve Ditko, and Roger Stern and Joe Duffy and Tom DeFalco, and it sold less than 400 copies. Like, that is insane to me. And you always hear a lot of people talking about, like, talking up sales as the end all be all. But this is brilliant, and it should be selling better, and it's not, because it's just marketing or people just don't understand. Quality and sales do not have anything to do with each other. But it is absolutely cheesy. And Roger Stern and Joe Duffy actually write the dialogue, probably a little cheesier than I've seen them write in other comics also. You could tell they were trying to do what Ditko wanted in their storytelling also. And towards the end of it, we get the love triangle amplified as this gal moves into town. She's a rich girl who's going to go to prom with Steve, and this is the original gal he was kind of after. Or not Steve, Steve Ditko with Robbie. And it really ups that Archie dynamic because it reminds me of Veronica quite a bit. There's one of the letter columns right there. So, pretty neat. They used to print full addresses in these letter columns. Good stuff. Can you imagine that these days? All right, so we get a couple more, and then the past comes back to haunt his parents at the end of this, and we get that real wrap-up of that continuing storyline in this issue number 9 here. And everybody's vindicated. Speedball does his thing. Look at this. Look at these beautiful panels of action. Speedball is such a ridiculous character, bouncing off the walls with these little light things with him. Love it. Very fun to read all this stuff. And then the 10th issue, because they already wrapped everything up there, what's interesting is the first letters column actually said that there was going to be a major Marvel villain starring in the 10th issue, and they did not do that. So they just brought back the standard sort of short storytelling, and somebody's found some lab stuff, and they've actually grown giant chickens and pigs and stuff like that, and it was an accident, and he solves it. And giant ants. Absolutely ridiculous. Giant snake. Very cool comic stuff. And then at the end of it, we have the giant rat. So, very cute. And this is the last one. And they also say it's going to continue in Marvel Comics Presents. But it actually continues in Marvel Comics Superheroes first, and this really doesn't add any to the continuing plot whatsoever. Got Fabian Nicieza, I think that's how you pronounce his name, doing the dialogue here, which I actually like better than Roger Stern's and Duffy's dialogue. And this one's about a gal at the school who wants to become a journalist, and she is becoming. I don't like the art, the inking on this. Who did this? Chris Ivey. The inking changed from the issues. You can see it's a little thicker of inks, and it changes the dynamic of what Ditko's expressions look like. But pretty neat. They introduce a new character who's then never seen again, and that's that. And then this one is a weird one in Marvel Superheroes #2, which Speedball just happens to be there between two people who are fighting. And there's like a moral to the story that, you should really not hold hate in your heart and let things go and things like that. Pretty neat. This was pretty good. And then we get some weird dice villains in this next one here. Random. These are very, very cool, innovative villains with they've all got different dice numbers on their face, and he beats him up on that. And because these are so short, we don't see a lot of the stuff with his parents and all that as much. There's no real development of the characters anymore because these are just shorts that are appearing in different series here, and it's kind of sad because you kind of are like, okay, we've reached the end of Speedball. These are just a couple of vignettes. We get a weird pirate. We learn that the town's on a cove, and I really don't like thinking on this. That's just a weird one. Trying to show shadow, but it didn't work out very well. And then on this, the inking on these Marvel Comics Presents was not quite as good as the original stuff. This one at the end is pretty fun, and the inking is interesting just because this character is so cartoony and 2D. The Bouncer, and it ends up a guy in a weird suit, and he just ties him down. So that's pretty fun. So that's the whole book. You get that whole storyline at the beginning that really starts out like a great 60s comic, and then you get those vignettes at the end. Each one of them's fun. I love the vignettes, to be honest. I mean, it reminds me of reading those old Tales of Suspense stuff that he did, or the old Amazing Fantasy stuff that he did. And like I said, there's parallels to Spider-Man, except for this one is done very straight-laced, so there's no possibility that Speedball's going to lose. He's going to be the hero. And as an adult, that's a little tougher to read than when you're as a kid, but this is also really geared towards kids also. So you could tell what he's doing with it, and you could tell his intent as an artist and as a writer. And because of that, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really found this refreshing compared to a lot of the dark and angsty books that are out there these days, and it makes a nice break from that. I'm sad that this didn't sell better, and I'm sad that people really don't check this out so much. For the character, I mean, unfortunately, Marvel kind of destroyed this character with just Ditko's creation, which really upsets me too. With the whole Civil War thing, they set up an incident that he was responsible for killing a bunch of kids. And that's the type of thing that if it wasn't Ditko and it wasn't this type of heroic character, maybe it would have been okay, but the fact that they did that, and this is obviously his intent for the character, and the fact that he opposed such storytelling to such a drastic degree is really a slap in the face of the creator. And I didn't know that. I just knew that this Speedball character, who I've never read before really, is responsible for killing kids, and Civil War sets off. And that put me off from even wanting to try this at that point, because it's why would I want to read the book about that guy, knowing that? And that's tough. So that definitely hurts the art here, just from a not careful future use of the character, and not honoring the original intent, which makes me sad. And I feel I have to address that a little in the review here. All right, that's it. 25 minutes for this book. It's actually not even that long, but gosh, guys, I really love this. I want more people to read Ditko's work, and I want them not to just read that, beginning of Spider-Man, because he's got so much to offer comics, such a different vibe than almost anything else out there. It's really worth your while. So check this out if you haven't already. And I will be back soon. Hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know if you've read Speedball, or if you like Ditko, or if you don't like it. Whatever. I mean, I'm not going to police what you like. Yeah, let me know. I'll be back.